Philosophers talk to our time. A brief history of Myddle. The case of the good Bishop Bereklley. I think I've often talked about Bishop Bereklley here. There's something about Bishop Bereklley that always brings me back to him. It's not that he was particularly profound, so much as that he was a man who took the time to notice his weirdnesses, even if in the end he was always in a hurry. You see, Bereklley notices something very strange about perception. On the one level, there is the thing he's very famous for saying. Perception is essence. I have ideas of things because they are my ideas, and perception is therefore always my idea. And yeah, he does say that, and that is absolutely true. And yet, Bishop Bereklley is also very clear. Perception is a strange idea. It's not like an imagination. It's something that I look into myself, and there it is. But it's always an idea of something else, something other than me. It is distinct then from the second idea I always have, the idea I have of the human mind. And the two are absolutely complementary, but not the same. And so, a perception isn't just my idea. It's my idea of something other than that which contains it, that relates to some idea of something that is beyond me and yet is inside me. And in taking the time to point that out, Bereklley is at least pointing out something very weird about Western metaphysics. I can be very pompous about it if you like. But at its core, it has this idea that perception is simple. That somehow we should start off with understanding how we perceive the world beyond us, and then understand ourselves through the light of that perception. And that's where Hegel, bless him, starts phenomenology of the human spirit. It's a dominant problem in Kant. And yet it's such a weird problem, because it assumes that perception is straightforward, that it relates to a world beyond it, and this is just it is just, as Nietzsche would probably say, just a compound lie. There is nothing less self-evident than perception. I mean, there's the concept of the self and the soul, okay, and God, yeah, they're less self-evident, but it's getting there. And Bereklley is at least taking time to dwell upon the weirdness of it. The weirdness of an idea that tumbles from outside and yet is in me entirely, is absolutely my idea. Now, he's not original in the sense that what he is actually doing here is paraphrasing Leibniz. He kind of says that. His Leibniz without the monad. His Leibniz, if Leibniz had ideas that were open and able to be perceived and didn't have to contain everything within them. But Leibniz only allows ideas to exist always in the monad because they're always there. Your future in Leibniz is calling out to you already. It isn't in Bereklley. It tumbles into your mind as something other than you. A perception, then, is something that necessarily exists in the middle of another. Your mind, if you like. While your mind is something that is filled with perceptions that are also always in the middle of another, but that other is yet more perceptions. Both of them are caught up then in being what they are only as they're caught up in something else. What makes a perception is that it relates to something other than itself. It is necessarily caught within something other than itself. It's caught within a mind. But what makes a mind know that it is perceiving is that the ideas that it contains are always gesturing to that which lies beyond it. And one of the things that Bereklley is hollowing out here is the importance, well, several things actually, is the importance of the concept of the another within this sort of philosophy. Another isn't the other. It's not something fixed, eternal, outside. It's not something that you're not. It's something that is implied by what is, and yet is always reaching for something else. It is only caught up in what it is. It is only in the middle of itself, as it is gesturing towards something else, a part of something else, a part of what is there, but not quite there. What is there, and yet to come. It is in the another. And so Bereklley's perception, the perception that is essence, is only a perception as it is in the middle of the mind. Likewise, the mind only exists as it is always in the middle of another perception, and that another perception is something beyond it, different from it, and yet something that it contains. It is the containing of that idea. And for me, that is the deep truth of Bereklley. It's not that perceptions are my idea, but that idea is always necessarily given in the middle of another, in the middle of me. It relates to how I have been changed. What makes it a perception at all is the fact that it has tumbled into something else, that something from the outside has tumbled into something into the inside, for want of a better word. But that inside and outside is itself the another relationship of perception. It is that which is creating the inside and the outside, the another. So that when you look at the perception, you know that it is not you, not of you. And yet it is yours, utterly and wholly yours, and yours alone. Now, the problem is with Bereklley at this point is that he doesn't want to go any further. He defines very well what it is for a perception to tumble into me, into be in the middle of another thing that I am, and always another. But he doesn't want to draw it out any further, and so he does what any nice little theologian does at that point. He rushes headlong to God. And God is how of course he'll understand how this all works. All of this works because we're in the midst, in another, in the mind of God. And the mind of God, of course, is operating differently because it's operating by a different set of rules. It's not the rules of another, it's in another. The mind of God is a mind that is creative, that is hooping us up, that is linking all these ideas together. It is that mind that we're meant to be learning about. Through perceiving the world, we're learning what it means to be within God's mind. Now, such a jump, okay. It doesn't appeal to modern sentiments, which is perfectly, unless you're David Icke, I suppose. I actually saw David Icke make the same argument. And what was weird about his argument was he didn't actually know that he was making Bishop Bereklley's argument. He thought that this was terribly original and exciting. But what Bereklley is at least very honestly doing is he's saying here that the middle of another is never enough. It's never enough to understand everything. Perceptions might contain within them their own appeal to something other than them. But they are also necessarily contained within something else that is different from that to which they are appealing. What do I mean by that? They're not causal. Spinoza will make exactly the same set of moves in his own Spinozary way when he will say that the chain of ideas and the chain of causes are one and the same. And if you are a little bit reading Spinoza without due care and attention, you won't notice the weirdness of that. Why that is so weird in Spinoza is that the chain of causes, in many ways, it's the last thing a mode is. Once a mode has done and is once a mode has done all that it can do and is broadcasting what it is to all the rest of substance, that is how it is a cause. In itself, yes, it is causal, but it has a whole series of causes affecting and re-affecting itself. So that the image that Spinoza invariably gives of marbles hitting marbles and momentum being passed on one to the other, one cause to another, is, if you like, how substance leaves one mode and goes to the next. And by positioning then ideas on the chain of perception, on the chain of causes. What he's saying is ideas exist then, how one mode affects another mode and exists within the differences between the cause and the effect, or relates it, but he is putting it purely on the side of the effect. How the effect understands how it has been changed by the cause. That's one of those ideas that's probably easier to read than it is to say, if I'm honest with you. But what it gives you then is this idea that perception within Spinoza is being in the middle of another, is to being in the middle in another. That in the another is the attribute and the chain of cause and effect, and it is perpetually on the side of effects and not causes. That's why Spinoza never breaks the parallelism of causation, because objective reality, that is the perceiving reality, is always on the side of the effect. And the fact that the effect could see the same thing in lots of different ways doesn't break the parallelism that really matters, which is the parallelism of causation. Now that's Spinoza's very subtle link, but that's because Spinoza wants to address very directly the second aspect of the Bereklley theory, the being in the middle of another. The being in the middle in another. In this case, the attribute. In this case, substance. In this case, being caught up as a mode of substance. Now, Bereklley doesn't want to address that because he wants the weirdness of being in the middle of another to stand out in itself, for itself, to simply be there. The weirdness of a perception. The weirdness of having something tumble into your mind and go, oh, this is a here and now, but it relates to something beyond me. The weirdness then of looking at trees as in the dawn rises to a hot day. That gives you a moment where you feel part of the dawn, and yet you know it to be your idea, and yet it is not an idea quite of you, and yet it is wholly yours. That's the weirdness that Bereklley, for me, allows you to explore. What it means to say that perception is always in the middle of another. That is what makes it perception. It is in the middle of a mind, but that mind only knows what it is as it is in the middle of another perception, always perceiving another, always having to link them to other perceptions, because that is what it is. Perception then exists as a great question mark that has its power, not because you see the green or the passive synthesis that gives you the idea of the tree, but rather that gives you it is that which gives you the alternativity of the tree, that makes you know that it was never of you, in you, that idea only exists as it appeals to something other than it is. It is always in the middle of another. And Bereklley always is a philosopher to come back to, because he allows you to not understand, because he doesn't understand why it is, because he rushes into saying, well, that's just because of God, and has a sole answer to it. But the problem he defines, that idea, which is explicitly vital to all Western metaphysics, that somehow we have contained within us ideas that are wholly ours, but relate to something that is wholly beyond us. Bereklley says that in the raw. He says it in the neat. He allows you to think about what on earth that might mean. What it means to live in a world where you have perceptions that appear simple, and it cannot be remotely simple. Cannot even begin to be simple. Bereklley won't explore why they can't be simple, because he's got a single answer. God. He doesn't really do in the middle in another. But he starts to allow you to define apart different senses that you're caught up in the world, in the middle of another, in the middle in another. And those form for me a 5-point way of understanding how you are caught up within the world. What that catching up is the world to you. What is you? Is all the various different forms of middle, which this history will move between. But Bereklley is unique in that he gives one version, pure and simple, in its weird alienality, in its real oddity. for you to see and go, yeah, and it doesn't quite work, but, which is for me always a good moment in philosophy.